Get out and don't ever come back. My parents told me. So I left without saying a word. 3 months later, my dad texted, "Why haven't you paid the mortgage?" I replied, "I thought I wasn't welcome." That's when my phone blew up with messages. My name is Madison, and for 26 years, I poured every ounce of myself into my family, believing loyalty meant endless sacrifice. I worked until I was bone-weary, paid their mortgage, and swallowed every cutting criticism, only for them to scream the words that ripped my world apart. Get out and never come back. It felt like the ultimate betrayal, but 3 months later, when my phone buzzed with their desperate call, I finally saw the shocking truth about who really needed whom. Before I share what happened next, please hit that like button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from today. Now, let me tell you how walking away from my family became the best decision I ever made. Growing up in a modest suburb just outside Columbus, Ohio, I was always the responsible one. You know that kid? My dad, Richard, he worked grueling, endless shifts at a local manufacturing plant. His hands were always stained with motor oil, his back perpetually aching from decades of hard labor. My mom, Patricia, she had a part-time gig as a bookkeeper, but honestly, her chronic migraines often kept her home, sometimes for days on end. And then there was my younger brother, Lucas, 3 years my junior. He just glided through life, you know? Everything seemed easy for him, all charm and no effort. From childhood, I naturally fell into the role of the peacekeeper. While Lucas would throw these epic tantrums or rebel against every rule, I was the one smoothing over conflicts, making sure everyone felt heard, trying to keep the calm. When my parents argued about money, and oh, did they argue about money, frequently, I'd be there, distracting Lucas with games, helping him with homework, anything to shield him from the tension. Teachers absolutely adored me. I was never any trouble, always turned in my assignments on time, and genuinely loved learning. My report cards weren't just A's. They were filled with glowing comments about my maturity, my helpfulness. I soaked it all in, feeling like I was doing everything right. The first time I truly contributed financially to our household, it was my senior year of high school. Dad's hours got slashed because of company downsizing, and Mom's health issues meant she missed even more work than usual. Without anyone even asking, I just picked up a part-time job at the local grocery store, working evenings and weekends. When I handed my parents my very first paycheck, I kept just a tiny bit for gas and school supplies. The relief on their faces, it made my chest swell with pride. I felt like I was saving them. "Madison, honey, you don't have to do this," my mom, Patricia, had said, but her fingers were clutching that check so tightly it almost crinkled. "I want to help," I told her, and I meant every single word. "We're a family. We take care of each other." That became my mantra. It was my guiding star through college. While all my friends were worried about student loans or just getting part-time jobs for pocket money, I was working to help support my family. I chose a state school close to home, lived in the cheapest dorm I could possibly find, and sent money home whenever I could spare a dime. My parents, they'd call to thank me, practically bragging to neighbors and relatives about their responsible, mature daughter who never forgot where she came from. It felt good. It felt right. After graduation, moving back home felt utterly natural. I'd landed a pretty decent job as a marketing coordinator at a mid-sized company, and Lucas was just starting his sophomore year at a university about 2 hours away. The arrangement seemed perfect. I could save money on rent, and I could help my family through what I truly believed was just a temporary rough patch. The mortgage payment was $1,847 a month. When my parents approached me about taking it over, they seemed almost embarrassed to ask. Dad explained that between his reduced hours and Mom's never-ending health problems, they were just struggling to keep up with everything. Just until we get back on our feet. Mom assured me. Maybe 6 months, a year at most. I agreed without a second of hesitation. It was family, right? Along with the mortgage, I gradually took over the utility bills, the grocery shopping, and all these various household expenses. To make ends meet, I picked up a second job, working weekends at a clothing store in the mall. Between both jobs, I was working nearly 60 hours a week. It was exhausting, bone-tired exhaustion, but seeing my parents' stress visibly diminish, that made every single grueling day worth it. My daily routine became this carefully choreographed dance of responsibility. I'd wake up at 5:30 a.m., squeeze in a brief workout in our cold basement, shower, grab coffee, and head straight to my primary job. During my lunch breaks, I'd pay bills online or handle family-related errands. After work, I'd grocery shop, pick up mom's prescriptions, or drive her to medical appointments when dad couldn't leave work early. Evenings were spent cooking dinner twice a week, helping with household chores, and trying, desperately, to maintain some semblance of a social life. The validation I received, it felt intoxicating. Neighbors would comment on what a wonderful daughter I was, how lucky my parents were to have such a responsible child. Extended family members would praise my maturity and selflessness during holiday gatherings. My parents themselves seemed genuinely grateful, often mentioning my contributions to friends and coworkers. Madison has been such a blessing. Mom would say during church functions. I don't know what we would do without her. Each time I heard it, a warmth spread through me. As months turned into a year, then two, the temporary arrangement became undeniably permanent, though no one ever explicitly discussed it. When Lucas needed textbooks that cost $400, I covered them without being asked. When the family car needed $800 in repairs, I handled that too. Emergency expenses, from medical copays to appliance replacements, they automatically became my responsibility. I told myself this was what family meant. This was how love looked in action. While friends my age were traveling the world, dating, or pursuing graduate degrees, I was building something meaningful, something solid, a foundation of security for the people I loved most. My apartment fund became the family emergency fund. My vacation savings became Lucas's textbook money. My retirement contributions became household repairs. The pride I felt seemed utterly justified by everyone's reactions. My parents bragged about me to their friends. Lucas appreciated his financial freedom to focus on his studies, and I, for the first time in my life, I felt genuinely important. I was indispensable. My contributions mattered in tangible, measurable ways. Looking back, I can see how gradually the dynamic shifted. But at the time, everything felt so natural and right. I was the successful daughter, the responsible one, the family's financial backbone. My identity became completely intertwined with my ability to provide and sacrifice. I measured my worth by how much I could give, how many problems I could solve, and how grateful my family seemed. What I didn't realize was that gratitude can transform into expectation so slowly, so subtly, that you don't notice until it's completely gone. The shift in my family's attitude toward me happened so gradually that, initially, I dismissed it as my imagination. It started with these small comments that seemed harmless enough but left me feeling vaguely unsettled. During one of our usual Sunday dinners, Patricia mentioned a coworker's daughter who had just gotten engaged. She's only 24, Mom said, glancing at me meaningfully. But she's got her whole life figured out. Some girls know how to balance career and personal life. The implication stung, a little pinprick, but I brushed it off. A few weeks later, Dad made an offhand comment about my work schedule. You know, Madison, all work and no play makes for a pretty dull life. When's the last time you went on a date? I had been on exactly 2 dates in the past year, both arranged by well-meaning coworkers. Both had ended early because I was utterly exhausted from working 2 jobs and couldn't focus on conversation that didn't revolve around immediate responsibilities. But how could I explain that I barely had time for sleep, let alone romance? I'm just focused on building my career right now, I replied. The standard answer I gave everyone who questioned my single status. That's what worries us, Mom said, her voice taking on a tone I'd never heard before. You're 25 years old, living at home with no social life. It's not healthy. The irony was suffocating. I was living at home because I was paying their mortgage. I had no social life because I was working extra hours to cover their expenses. But somehow, these undeniable facts had been twisted into character flaws rather than the sacrifices they truly were. The criticism escalated during family dinners, which had always been this sacred time for us. Lucas would share stories about his college friends, his internship prospects, his social activities, and my parents would listen with rapt attention, hanging on his every word. When I tried to share achievements from work or interesting projects I was developing, the response was polite but distant. That's nice, honey, Dad would say before immediately changing the subject to Lucas's latest accomplishment, or asking Mom about her day. I began to feel like a background character in my own family's story. My contributions were acknowledged only when bills needed paying, but my thoughts, my dreams, my experiences, they seemed to hold little to no interest for anyone. The comparison game became a regular, painful occurrence. During one particularly excruciating dinner, Mom spent 20 minutes praising Lucas's girlfriend, a psychology major who was so well-rounded and really going places. She detailed the girl's internship, her volunteer work, her study abroad plans. Now that's a girl who knows how to make the most of her opportunities, Mom concluded, a pointed glance in my direction. She's not letting life pass her by. The unspoken message was a sledgehammer. Unlike me, this girl was living correctly. She wasn't trapped in a cycle of work and responsibility. She was experiencing the world, taking risks, building a future that extended beyond merely paying bills. When I mentioned feeling utterly overwhelmed with my workload and suggested reducing my retail hours to focus on advancing at my primary job, the reaction was swift and shockingly sharp. "Well, nobody forced you to take on so much responsibility," Patricia said, her voice chilling me to the bone. "You made these choices yourself." The statement was technically true, yes, but it completely missed the entire context. Yes, I had chosen to help them, but that choice was made out of love and unwavering family loyalty. Hearing it framed as my personal decision that I shouldn't complain about felt like a betrayal of everything I thought we had built together. Richard began making comments about my lifestyle choices that felt increasingly judgmental, almost accusatory. When I finally bought myself a new jacket after months of agonizing deliberation, he made a pointed remark about some people having money to throw around. When I mentioned considering a small vacation with Emma, he wondered aloud about people who could afford to be irresponsible with their finances. These comments were particularly painful because I was incredibly careful with money. Every single purchase was considered and reconsidered a dozen times. I bought generic groceries, shop sales for clothing, and hadn't been to a movie theater in over a year. Yet somehow, I was being painted as frivolous and self-indulgent. The double standard became impossible to ignore. Lucas could spend money on video games, nights out with friends, and spring break trips without anyone ever questioning his financial priorities. When he bought an expensive new laptop for school, our parents celebrated his investment in his future. When I bought a $10 book, Richard made comments about unnecessary spending. My parents began treating me more like a paying tenant than a beloved daughter. They made plans without consulting me, even for family events I had traditionally been included in. When they decided to rearrange the living room, they didn't ask for my input, despite the fact that I spent my evenings there and, was paying for the house. "It's our house," Patricia said when I asked about the new furniture arrangement. That possessive pronoun felt like a slap after years of paying their mortgage. The emotional distance grew wider each week, a gaping chasm. My parents stopped asking about my day with genuine interest. They no longer praised my work achievements, or seemed proud of my professional growth. The warm appreciation I had once felt from them was replaced by a kind of grudging tolerance, as if my very presence in their home was an inconvenience they had to endure. The most painful realization was that they seemed to be actively encouraging me to leave. Comments about independence, suggestions that I was too comfortable living at home, and pointed questions about my future living arrangements became regular topics of conversation. I began to question everything. Had I misunderstood our arrangement all this time? Were they truly feeling burdened by my presence, despite my significant financial contributions? Was I actually helping them, or was I somehow imposing myself on their lives in ways I hadn't recognized? The seeds of doubt that these interactions planted would soon grow into a forest of confusion and hurt that would change everything between us forever. The tension in our house became so thick, you could literally cut it with a knife. But I kept telling myself that it was temporary stress, from external factors. Maybe Richard was worried about job security, or Patricia's health was bothering her more than she admitted. I clung to these flimsy explanations because accepting the alternative meant confronting the devastating possibility that my family genuinely didn't want me around. The breaking point began building when my parents announced their plans to redecorate the house. They had been talking about updating the living room and kitchen for months, discussing paint colors and furniture styles with an enthusiasm I hadn't seen from them in years. "We've saved up enough to finally make this place feel like home again," Patricia said excitedly, showing me magazine clippings of modern furniture sets and color schemes. I was happy for them, truly, until I realized what saved up actually meant. They expected me to fund the $3,500 renovation project, while being completely excluded from any design decisions. "We've already picked everything out," Richard explained when I asked about the budget. "We just need you to cover the costs since you're so good with managing money." The casual assumption that I would pay for improvements to a house where I was increasingly unwelcome felt like being slapped across the face. When I hesitantly asked if I could have input on choices that would affect the common areas where I spend my time, Patricia's response was swift and cutting. "It's our house, Madison. We've lived here for 28 years. I think we know what we want." That possessive language stung, especially since I had been paying their mortgage for almost 2 years at that point. But rather than argue, I just agreed to fund their project, telling myself that happy parents would mean a more peaceful household. Around the same time, my career was reaching a crucial turning point. My manager had approached me about a promotion opportunity that would involve additional training, longer hours initially, and eventually, a significant salary increase. It was exactly the kind of advancement I had been working toward, a dream coming true, but it would require reducing my weekend retail job to accommodate the extra responsibilities. When I mentioned this opportunity during dinner, expecting some family celebration of my professional growth, the reaction was immediate and utterly hostile. "So, you're planning to abandon your family responsibilities for your career?" Richard asked, his voice heavy with accusation. "It's not abandoning anything," I protested, my voice trembling. "It's a chance to advance professionally, which would ultimately benefit everyone." "Sounds pretty selfish to me," Patricia added, her eyes narrowed. "We depend on that income, Madison. You can't just decide to make less money because you want a fancier job title." Their response revealed everything about how they viewed my role in the family. I wasn't their daughter pursuing her dreams. I was their income source, threatening to reduce profits. The promotion wasn't a celebration-worthy achievement. It was an inconvenience to their meticulous financial planning. Lucas came home for spring break during this time, and his presence only amplified the existing tensions, making everything worse. While I was working 60-hour weeks and funding household improvements, he was planning an expensive trip to Cancun with his fraternity brothers. "Mom and Dad said they could help with the trip costs," he mentioned casually while I was cooking dinner. "It's important for networking and building relationships that could help my career later." I watched, stunned, as my parents handed him $800 for what was essentially a party vacation. They had just criticized me for considering a professional advancement opportunity, yet they funded his frivolous trip. The double standard was so blatant that I couldn't ignore it anymore. It was a punch to the gut. The situation worsened when my friend Emma visited for a weekend. I had been so isolated by my work schedule and family obligations that I rarely saw friends anymore, so her visit felt like a rare opportunity to reconnect with my social life, a breath of fresh air. Emma, bless her heart, immediately noticed the toxic family dynamics during her stay. At dinner, she watched my parents praise Lucas extensively for his academic performance and social activities while barely acknowledging my own work achievements. When I mentioned a successful marketing campaign I had developed, Richard changed the subject within 30 seconds to ask Lucas about his internship applications. "Madison has been such a support to this family," Emma said, trying to redirect attention to my contributions, bless her. "It's amazing how she manages 2 jobs and still helps with everything around here." The silence that followed her comment was absolutely deafening. My parents exchanged glances that I couldn't interpret, and Lucas suddenly became very, very interested in his food. Later that evening, Emma pulled me aside for a private conversation that would prove to be a shocking turning point. "I need to ask you something, and I want you to really think about your answer," she said gently, her eyes full of concern. "Do you feel appreciated in this house?" The question hit me like a physical blow because it forced me to confront feelings I had been suppressing for months, burying them deep down. "Of course," I replied automatically, a defensive reflex. "They're my family." "That's not what I asked, Madison," she pressed, her voice unwavering. "Do you feel appreciated? Do they treat you like someone they're grateful to have around, or like someone they expect things from?" Her words planted seeds of doubt that I couldn't shake. They took root and began to bloom into something terrifying. That night, after Emma finally went to sleep, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying months of interactions through this new, painful lens. When had my parents last truly thanked me for my countless contributions? When had they last genuinely asked about my goals, my dreams, my happiness? When had they last treated me like a daughter, rather than just a resource? The most devastating realization came 2 days after Emma left. I was coming back from grocery shopping when I overheard my parents talking in the kitchen, apparently unaware that I had returned. "I wish Madison would just move out already," Patricia was saying, her voice laced with pure annoyance. She acts like she owns this place just because she pays some bills. I know, Richard agreed. She's becoming a burden with all her opinions about everything, and lately she's been so moody and difficult to be around. Maybe we should start encouraging her more directly to find her own place, Patricia suggested, her voice cold and deliberate. She's 26 years old. It's not normal for her to still be living here. I stood frozen in the hallway, grocery bags cutting into my hands, as my entire world crumbled around me. The people I had sacrificed everything for saw me as a burden. The family I had supported financially and emotionally for years wished I would just disappear. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to have a conversation. A real conversation about boundaries, about mutual respect, and what our family relationship actually meant to all of us. I had no idea that this conversation would explode into something that would destroy everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and family. I spent 3 agonizing days planning what I would say to my family. I wrote down key points, practiced different approaches in my head, and tried to anticipate their responses, wanting to be prepared for anything. I genuinely believed that honest communication could fix whatever had gone so terribly wrong between us. I chose Sunday dinner as the time for our conversation, thinking that the familiar setting would help keep things calm and productive. Lucas was home for the weekend, so we would all be together. I prepared my favorite pasta dish, set the table nicely, and tried to create an atmosphere that would encourage open dialogue. I'd like to talk to you all about something that's been bothering me, I began, after we had finished eating. My voice was steady, my tone respectful, even as my heart hammered against my ribs. I've been feeling like there's some tension in our family lately, and I think we should address it before it gets worse. The reaction was immediate and ice cold. Richard slowly sat down his fork and crossed his arms, his face hardening, while Patricia's expression shifted to something I had never seen before, pure, undisguised annoyance. What kind of tension? Richard asked, his voice already defensive, practically daring me to speak. I feel like I've been walking on eggshells around here. I continued carefully, choosing my words. I love this family and I want to help, but lately it seems like nothing I do is appreciated. I'd like us to talk about how we can communicate better and make sure everyone feels valued. Valued? Patricia laughed, a harsh, humorless sound that chilled me. Madison, we've given you a roof over your head for 26 years. We raised you, fed you, clothed you, paid for your education, and you're sitting here talking about feeling undervalued? Her response caught me completely off guard. This wasn't the direction I had expected the conversation to take, not at all. I'm not talking about the past, I said, trying desperately to stay calm. I'm grateful for everything you've done for me. I'm talking about now, about how we interact as adults. I feel like my contributions to this family aren't appreciated, and I'd like to understand why that is. Your contributions? Richard's voice was rising now, full of barely contained fury. What contributions? You mean paying some bills, Madison? That's called being an adult. That's called taking responsibility for yourself instead of freeloading off your parents forever. The word freeloading hit me like a physical blow, a vicious punch to the gut. I had been working 2 jobs, 2 exhausting jobs, to support this family for over 2 years, and he was calling me a freeloader? I've been paying your mortgage for 2 years, I said, my voice starting to shake, a tremor I couldn't control. I pay for groceries, utilities, Lucas's textbooks, car repairs, medical co-pays. How is that freeloading? Nobody asked you to do that. Patricia snapped, her eyes blazing. Those were your choices, Madison. You decided to take on all that responsibility, and now you're trying to use it to control us. Control you? I was genuinely confused, tears starting to sting my eyes. How am I trying to control anyone? You act like you own this place. Lucas chimed in, speaking for the first time, his voice surprisingly cold. You have opinions about everything. You act like we owe you something, and you make everyone feel guilty whenever they spend money. The betrayal from my younger brother, whose education I had been partially funding, cut deeper than anything my parents had said. It was a fresh wound. I don't understand, I whispered, the tears finally starting to fall. I thought I was helping. I thought we were a team. A team? Richard stood up, his face flushed an angry red. Madison, you're 26 years old with no life, no boyfriend, no friends, living in your parents' house and acting like a martyr because you choose to pay bills instead of building your own life. Each word felt like a knife twisting in my chest. They weren't just attacking my contributions. They were attacking my entire existence, my life choices, my very character. You want to know the truth? Patricia said, standing up as well, her voice cruel now, sharper than I had ever heard it. We think you're pathetic. You're 26 years old, and your entire identity revolves around being needed by your family. You don't have hobbies, interests, or goals that don't involve us. It's unhealthy, and frankly, it's exhausting. You're manipulative, Richard added, his voice dripping with disgust. You've made yourself so involved in our finances that we feel guilty for making any decisions without you. That's not love, Madison. That's emotional blackmail. I tried to defend myself, to explain that I had only ever wanted to help, that every single contribution had been given freely, out of genuine love, but my words were drowned out by their continued, relentless attacks. You want to know what we really think? Patricia's voice was a venomous whisper. We think you're pathetic. You're 26 years old, and your entire identity revolves around being needed by your family. You don't have hobbies, interests, or goals that don't involve us. It's unhealthy and frankly it's exhausting. You make everyone walk on eggshells. Lucas added, nodding along. We can't enjoy anything without feeling like we have to justify it to you. We can't make plans without considering your schedule. We can't have conversations without you inserting yourself into every decision. I don't do that. I protested weakly, my voice barely a whisper. But even as I said it, a chilling doubt crept in. Were they right? Had my desire to help crossed into controlling behavior? You absolutely do, Richard said, his voice final. And we're tired of it. We're tired of feeling guilty for living our own lives in our own house. This is my house too, I said, the words coming out more forcefully than I intended, a desperate cry. I pay the mortgage. I pay the bills. I have a right to be involved in decisions that affect me. The silence that followed was deafening. My parents looked at each other, and I saw something pass between them, a silent communication I couldn't interpret. Actually, Patricia said slowly, her voice cold and deliberate. That's exactly the problem. You think paying bills gives you ownership? You think contributing money makes you entitled to control our decisions? That's not how family works, Madison. Then how does family work? I asked, genuinely confused and deeply hurt, my voice cracking. Because I thought it meant supporting each other and being grateful for help when times are tough. Family, Richard said coldly, his eyes narrowed. Works when everyone respects boundaries and lives their own lives instead of trying to control others through financial manipulation. The accusation of manipulation was the final straw, the breaking point of my entire being. After years of sacrifice, after giving up my own opportunities and dreams to help them, they were accusing me of manipulation. Fine, I said, standing up from the table, my legs shaky. If that's how you feel, maybe I should just leave. I expected them to protest, to apologize, to realize they had gone too far. Instead, my parents exchanged another look, a chilling, shared understanding, and Patricia spoke words that would haunt me forever. Actually, yes. Maybe you should. You're 26 years old, Madison. It's time you learned to live independently, instead of hiding behind family obligations. The room spun around me. They weren't just failing to stop me from leaving. They were encouraging it. You want me to leave? I asked, barely able to form the words, my voice a broken whisper. We think it would be best for everyone, Richard said, his voice flat. You need to build your own life instead of living vicariously through ours. And we need space to be a family without feeling like we're being watched and judged all the time. Lucas nodded in agreement, a casual nod, and that betrayal felt like the final nail in the coffin of everything I had ever believed about our family. You're ungrateful, Richard shouted when I didn't respond immediately, his face contorted in anger. Get out and never come back. We don't need your guilt trips or your money anymore. The words echoed in the sudden, painful silence. My entire family had just told me to leave and never return. The people I had sacrificed everything for had just rejected me completely. I looked at each of their faces, searching desperately for any sign of regret, any hesitation, any flicker of love. Instead, I saw relief. Pure, unadulterated relief. They wanted me gone. Okay, I said quietly, a strange calm settling over me. I'll leave. And for the first time in that entire horrific conversation, I meant every single word I said. The calm acceptance in my voice seemed to surprise everyone, even myself. I think they expected me to break down, to beg for forgiveness, or to promise to change my behavior. Instead, I simply nodded and said, "I'll pack my things." I walked upstairs to my childhood bedroom with steady steps, though my heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears, a frantic drumbeat. The room looked the same as it had the day before. My marketing textbooks on the desk, photos from college with Emma on the dresser, the lavender comforter my mother had bought me for my 16th birthday. But everything felt different now, alien, like I was seeing it all through a stranger's eyes. I pulled 2 suitcases from my closet and began packing methodically, almost robotically. Essential clothes, important documents, my laptop, a few sentimental items. I left behind furniture, most of my books, kitchen appliances I had purchased, and decorations I had accumulated over the years. Those things belonged to a life I was apparently no longer welcome to live. The most surreal part was the silence from downstairs. No one came to check on me, to apologize, or to suggest we try to work things out. I could hear the low murmur of conversation and occasional laughter, as if nothing significant had just happened, as if their daughter and sister hadn't just been banished from the family. Lucas actually came upstairs as I was loading my car. "Need help with anything?" he asked casually, as if I were moving out under completely normal circumstances, going to college or something. "I've got it," I replied, not trusting myself to say more, to betray the torrent of pain inside me. He helped carry my computer bag to the car, making small talk about the weather and his upcoming finals. The normalcy of his behavior was more painful than outright hostility would have been. This was just a regular moving day to him, not a family destruction. I left my house key on the kitchen counter, a cold, metallic goodbye, and walked out without saying a word. My parents were in the living room, and I could see them through the doorway, but they didn't acknowledge my departure. The sound of the front door closing behind me felt final in a way that made my chest tight, a crushing weight. Emma welcomed me into her apartment without question, asking only if I was safe and if I needed anything immediate. That first night, I lay on her couch staring at the ceiling, replaying every agonizing moment of the confrontation. I kept expecting my phone to ring with an apology, an explanation, or at least some acknowledgement that something terrible had just happened to our family. The phone never rang. The first few weeks were devastating in ways I hadn't anticipated. I cried at random moments, in grocery stores when I saw pasta sauce that reminded me of family dinners, at work when coworkers asked about weekend plans that used to involve family time, at night when the absence of familiar voices and sounds made Emma's apartment feel like a foreign country. But something truly unexpected began happening alongside the grief. For the first time in years, I had money left over after paying my bills. Without the mortgage, the utilities, groceries for 4 people, and constant family emergencies, my paychecks actually covered my expenses with room to spare. I could afford to buy organic groceries without calculating every cost. I could replace my worn-out work clothes without guilt. I could even consider buying coffee from the fancy shop near my office instead of making it at home to save $3 a day. These small luxuries felt almost shameful at first, like I was betraying my former values about financial responsibility. My work performance improved dramatically without the constant, suffocating stress of family obligations. I no longer had to leave early for Patricia's doctor appointments, or take frantic calls during meetings about household emergencies. I could focus entirely on my projects, attend networking events after work, and pursue the professional development opportunities one had been putting off for so long. My manager noticed the change immediately. "You seem different lately," she said during my performance review. "More confident, more engaged. Whatever you're doing, Madison, keep it up." I started therapy to process what had happened. Partly because Emma gently suggested it, and partly because I genuinely couldn't understand how my family relationships had deteriorated so completely. My therapist, Dr. Chin, introduced me to concepts I had never heard before: parentification, codependency, emotional manipulation. "It sounds like you took on adult responsibilities very young," she explained during one of our sessions. "That can create unhealthy family dynamics where your value becomes tied to what you provide rather than who you are." Through therapy, I began to understand that my family's treatment of me wasn't a sudden personality change, but the result of deeply ingrained patterns that had been developing for years. They had become accustomed to my unwavering support without ever reciprocating emotional care. I had unknowingly enabled their dependence while sacrificing my own growth and independence. 3 months passed without any contact from my family. I created new routines, developed genuine friendships with coworkers, and started exploring hobbies I had abandoned years earlier. I took a painting class, joined a book club, and even went on a few dates with a colleague who made me laugh and, shockingly, treated me like I was worth pursuing. My new apartment was small, but it was entirely mine. I chose the furniture, the colors, the decorations. I cooked meals I enjoyed instead of trying to please everyone else's preferences. I watched movies I wanted to see, listened to music I liked, and made decisions based on my own desires rather than family obligations. The independence was intoxicating. I had forgotten what it felt like to live for myself, to make choices based on my own needs and wants. I started saving money for goals that had nothing to do with anyone else: a vacation to Europe, a graduate degree, a down payment on a house of my own. But the most surprising change was how little I missed the constant drama and criticism that had characterized my family life. I hadn't realized how much emotional energy I had been spending on managing other people's feelings and reactions. Without that crushing burden, I felt lighter, freer, and more optimistic than I had in years. I was building a life that belonged entirely to me. And for the first time, I was genuinely happy, which made what happened next all the more revealing about the true, transactional nature of my family's feelings toward me. I was grocery shopping on a Tuesday evening, 3 months and 2 weeks after leaving my family home, when my phone buzzed with a text message. The sight of my father's name on the screen made my stomach drop, a familiar, unwelcome pang. For a moment, I considered ignoring it entirely, but curiosity, that potent human weakness, won. The message was brief and chillingly to the point. "Why haven't you paid the mortgage?" I stared at those 6 words for a full minute, standing in the pasta aisle of the grocery store, as the full, cold implications sank in. Not, "How are you?" or, "We miss you," or, "Can we talk?" Just a demand to know why I hadn't sent money. The text revealed everything about their true motivations for our reconciliation. They didn't want their daughter back. They wanted their ATM machine back. I took a screenshot of the message and sent it to Emma with a caption. "Apparently, I was never actually unwelcome, just temporarily inconvenient." Then I crafted my response carefully, each word deliberate. "I thought I wasn't welcome anymore." My phone rang within 30 seconds. "Madison." Richard's voice was different than it had been during our confrontation. Gone was the anger and righteousness. Now there was raw panic, and something that almost sounded like desperation. "Dad," I said calmly, leaning against my shopping cart, feeling an unfamiliar strength. "We need to talk," he said, the words tumbling out quickly. "There's been some misunderstanding about what happened that night." "What kind of misunderstanding?" I asked, genuinely curious about how he would possibly explain this away. "We didn't mean for you to actually leave permanently," he said, rushing his words. "We were all upset, saying things we didn't mean. You know how family arguments can get." "Actually, I don't," I replied, my voice steady. "Because in healthy families, people don't tell their children to get out and never come back unless they mean it." "Madison, please," he continued, his voice cracking. "We love you. We miss you. This whole thing has gotten way out of hand." The declaration of love would have meant something, anything, if it had come before the mortgage inquiry, but the timing made it devastatingly clear that their affection was directly tied to their financial needs. "How are things going financially?" I asked, already knowing the answer. The pause on the other end of the line told me everything. "It's been challenging," he admitted, his voice deflating. "We've fallen behind on some payments. The bank sent us a notice about foreclosure proceedings." "What about the money you saved by not having me around?" I asked, a bitter taste in my mouth. "You know, all those groceries I wasn't eating, utilities I wasn't using, space I wasn't taking up?" "It's not that simple," Richard said, a pathetic excuse. "Your income was, we had adjusted our budget based on your contributions." Translation: they had spent 3 years living beyond their means because they knew I would always cover the shortfall. "Can I talk to her?" I heard Patricia's voice, sharp with urgency, in the background. "Madison, your mother wants to speak to you," Richard said, sounding defeated. Patricia's voice came through the phone with a forced sweetness that I remembered vividly from my childhood, that particular tone she used when she wanted something from me. "Honey, we've been so worried about you," she began, the lie so blatant that I almost laughed right there in the grocery aisle. They had my phone number, my work information, and Emma's contact details. If they had wanted to reach me for any reason other than money, they could have done so months ago. "We made mistakes that night," Patricia continued, laying on the false contrition thick. We said things in anger that we didn't mean. But you have to understand, we're family. Family works through problems together. What problems are we working through? I asked, cutting through her charade. Well, this financial situation, for one thing, she said, dropping the pretense slightly. We're facing foreclosure, Madison. We could lose the house. Is that really what you want? The emotional manipulation was exactly what Dr. Chin had warned me to expect. They were making their financial crisis my responsibility, and my fault. How much do you owe? I asked, my voice flat. We're 3 months behind on the mortgage, Richard said, getting back on the phone. Plus late fees and penalties. We need about $6,000 to get current. $6,000. 3 months of mortgage payments that they had expected me to cover, despite telling me to leave and never come back. What happened to the money you've been earning and saving without me around? I asked, already anticipating the excuse. Another pause. Patricia's hours were cut at work, Richard said, almost mumbling. And Lucas needed help with an unexpected expense for school. Of course, Lucas needed money. And of course, they had prioritized his needs over their mortgage payments, assuming I would eventually come back to fix their perennial financial problems. Madison, Patricia said, her voice taking on a pleading, desperate tone. I know we hurt your feelings, but you can't punish the whole family because of one argument. This house has been in our family for 30 years. Lucas grew up here. This is our home. The house that she had specifically referred to as our house, when she wanted to exclude me from decisions, was now suddenly a sacred family legacy that I was responsible for preserving. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. I'm not punishing anyone, I said, a steely resolve in my voice. I'm respecting your wishes. You told me to get out and never come back. You said you didn't need my guilt trips or my money. I believed you. We were angry, Richard protested, practically shouting. People say things they don't mean when they're upset. You have to know we didn't want you to actually leave forever. Then what did you want? I asked, pushing the point. The silence stretched long enough that I knew they were realizing the trap in the question. They had wanted me to be properly chastised, to accept their criticism without defending myself, to continue paying their bills while accepting less respect and consideration. They had wanted the benefits of my financial support without the inconvenience of treating me like a valued family member. We want you to come home, Patricia finally said, her voice thin and reedy. We want our family back together. What would that look like? I asked, challenging her. If I came back, what would be different? We'd treat you better, Richard said quickly, almost too quickly. We'd be more appreciative. We'd make sure you felt valued. Empty promises, designed solely to solve their immediate financial crisis. There was no acknowledgement of the specific ways they had hurt me, no genuine understanding of why their behavior had been so problematic, and certainly no concrete plan for changing their ingrained attitudes. And if I can't move back right away? I asked. If I need time to think about it? Well, we need help with the mortgage situation regardless, Patricia said, her voice returning to its demanding edge. Even if you're not ready to move back, surely you can help us avoid foreclosure. We're still family. There it was. The real ask. They wanted my money, whether I came back or not. They wanted me to resume financial responsibility for their household while they decided whether they could tolerate my presence. I looked around the grocery store at other shoppers, living their normal lives, making choices about dinner and weekend plans. I thought about my peaceful apartment, my growing savings account, my improving work performance, and my newfound sense of self-worth. I'll call you back, I said, and hung up the phone. For the first time in months, I knew exactly what I was going to say to my family. And I was finally ready to say it. I waited 2 days before calling my parents back. Not because I needed time to make my decision, that had been made the moment I hung up, but because I wanted to be completely clear about my boundaries before I communicated them. I had spent too many years reacting to their demands instead of responding from a place of strength and clarity. When I finally called, Richard answered on the first ring, a desperate urgency in his voice. Madison, thank God, he said. We've been waiting to hear from you. I've made my decision, I said calmly, my voice steady, firm, unwavering. I won't be moving back home, and I won't be helping with the mortgage or any other financial obligations. The silence stretched so long that I wondered if the call had dropped. What do you mean? Patricia's voice came through the speaker, sharp with disbelief, almost a shriek. I mean exactly what I said. I'm not coming back, and I'm not sending money. But we explained that we didn't mean what we said that night. Richard protested, his voice desperate. We were upset. We want you to come home. No, you don't, I replied, my voice holding the weight of years of pain. You want my money. If you wanted me, you would have called 3 months ago to apologize. You would have reached out when you realized you missed me, not when you realized you missed my financial contributions. That's not fair, Patricia said, indignant. We gave you space because we thought that's what you wanted. You gave me space because it was easier than admitting you were wrong. I corrected, my voice unwavering. And you only ended that space when you needed something from me. I could hear muffled conversation in the background, hushed whispers. Then Richard spoke again, trying a different tactic. Madison, I understand you're hurt, but we're facing foreclosure. We could lose our home. Surely your anger isn't worth more than your family's security. The attempt to make me responsible for their crisis was exactly what I had expected, and I was ready for it, armed by Dr. Chin's guidance. Your financial security is not my responsibility, I said, my voice cutting through his plea. You told me I was manipulative for making myself necessary to your finances. You told me I was controlling for having opinions about money I contributed. You told me I was selfish for prioritizing my career advancement, so I removed myself from your financial situation entirely. I respected your wishes. You're being vindictive, Patricia accused, her voice rising in a furious crescendo. You're punishing us for one argument. I'm not punishing anyone, I replied, my voice steady and strong. I'm protecting myself from being taken advantage of again. You spent 3 years accepting my money while criticizing my character. You made me feel guilty for every personal purchase while expecting me to fund your wants and needs without question. That's not a relationship I'm willing to continue. But we're family, Richard said, his voice taking on a pleading tone I had never heard before, a pathetic whine. Yes, we are, I agreed. And family should support each other's growth, celebrate each other's achievements, and treat each other with respect. When did you last do any of those things for me? The question hung in the air, unanswered, because we all knew the devastating truth. They couldn't remember the last time they had shown genuine interest in my happiness or success that didn't directly relate to their own benefit. We'll do better, Patricia promised, her voice desperate. We'll change how we treat you. Just help us through this crisis and things will be different. You had 3 years to treat me better when I was contributing to your household, I said, a profound sadness in my voice. You chose to take me for granted instead. I'm not giving you another opportunity to do the same thing. What about Lucas? Richard asked, playing what he clearly thought was his strongest, most unassailable card. He'll have to drop out of school if we lose the house. Do you want to ruin your brother's future? The emotional manipulation was so transparent, so crude, that I felt insulted by his assumption that it would work on me. Lucas is 23 years old, I replied, my voice cold. He can take out student loans like millions of other college students. He can get a part-time job like I did. He can learn to support himself instead of depending on family money for his lifestyle. That's cruel, Patricia shrieked. He shouldn't have to struggle because you're holding a grudge. It's not cruel to expect an adult to be financially responsible for himself, I said. It's not a grudge to refuse to enable a family that doesn't respect me. It's called having boundaries. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with my parents alternating between guilt trips, empty promises, and subtle threats about what would happen to our family relationships if I didn't help them. I listened to all of it with a detachment that truly surprised me. Finally, I ended the call with words I had been preparing for days, a cathartic release. I spent 3 years being your ATM while you criticized and dismissed me, I said, my voice full of a quiet, unshakable power. I sacrificed my social life, my career advancement, and my self-worth to keep you comfortable. You didn't appreciate it then, and you only miss it now because you need money. I'm not coming back to be taken for granted again. Madison, please. Richard tried one more time, a desperate, final plea. You told me to get out and never come back. I continued, cutting him off, my voice steady. You said you didn't need my guilt trips or my money. I respected your wishes then, and I'm respecting them now. Don't contact me again unless you have something to say that doesn't involve asking for money. I hung up and immediately blocked their numbers. The relief I felt was immediate and overwhelming, a tidal wave washing over me. For the first time in years, I wasn't responsible for anyone else's financial security, emotional well-being, or life choices. I was free. Free to build a life based on my own values and priorities. 6 months later, I received a promotion at work that came with a significant salary increase. I moved into a beautiful one-bedroom apartment with hardwood floors and a balcony overlooking a small park. I started dating someone who appreciated my ambition and independence. I took a vacation to Italy with Emma, something I never could have afforded while supporting my family. Most importantly, I learned to value myself the way I had always valued others. I discovered that my worth wasn't determined by how much I could sacrifice or how many problems I could solve for other people. I was valuable simply because I existed, because I was kind and hardworking and thoughtful, not because I was useful. I never heard from my family again, which told me everything I needed to know about what I had really meant to them. Through social media, I learned that they had lost the house and moved into a smaller rental property. Lucas transferred to a community college and got a part-time job. My parents downsized their lifestyle significantly. I felt sadness about their struggles, but no guilt. They had made choices that led to their situation, and they would have to make choices to improve it. Those choices were not my responsibility. The most valuable lesson I learned was this: love should never require you to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. True family supports your growth and celebrates your success rather than exploiting your loyalty and taking your sacrifices for granted. I thought being a good daughter meant sacrificing everything for family. But I learned that being a good daughter means respecting yourself enough to expect respect in return. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let people face the consequences of their choices, because that's the only way they learn to make better ones. I'm not ungrateful for what my family gave me growing up. I'm grateful for the strength I found to recognize when giving became enabling, when love became exploitation, and when loyalty became self-destruction. Walking away from my family was the hardest thing I ever did. But it was also the moment I finally learned to love myself. Today, I'm genuinely happy and free, surrounded by people who value me for who I am rather than what I can provide. I've learned that my worth isn't measured by how much I sacrifice for others, but by how well I honor my own value and maintain my boundaries. That's a lesson that changed everything for me, and I hope it might help someone else who is struggling with similar choices. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to choose between family loyalty and self-respect? Thanks for watching. Take care. Good luck.